Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is late. They're sprinting through an airport terminal, checking the wrist every 30 seconds, calculating exactly how many minutes they have left before the universe collapses. Somewhere else, a man is lying awake at 3 a.m. doing mental arithmetic about deadlines. A woman is watching a countdown timer on her phone like it owes her money. We are a species absolutely tyrannized by time. But here's the thing, for 99% of human history, none of this existed. No alarms, no schedules, no appointments, no concept of being late because there was nowhere you were supposed to be at any specific moment. You woke up when your body told you to. You ate when you were hungry. You stopped working when the light disappeared. Time wasn't a number. It was a feeling, a biological pulse dictated by sunlight and hunger and the slow wheel of seasons turning overhead. And yet today, we carve every single day into identical slices and sell them back to ourselves as productivity. So here's the question nobody actually asks. Time is real. Physics proves it exists. But the clock, that invisible cage we've built around our entire civilization, where did that come from? Who decided to cut reality into pieces? And what did we lose when they did? The first person to measure time was probably just watching a shadow move. Somewhere in Egypt, roughly 3,500 years ago, someone noticed that the shadow cast by a stick in the ground told you something useful. Where the shadow fell in the morning was different from where it fell at noon. Different again by late afternoon. The shadow was a clock hand. The ground was the face. The sun did the rest. So they built devices to read it. Obelisks, shadow clocks, eventually the sundial. And suddenly, for the first time in human history, you could point onto something and say, it is this time. Right now. But then came a decision that still shapes your life today. How many pieces do you cut the day into? The Egyptians chose 12, and they chose it for a reason that has nothing to do with the sun. Hold out one hand and use your thumb to count the knuckles on your 4 fingers. 3 knuckles per finger, 4 fingers, 12. The Egyptians counted in base 12, and that arithmetic accident has governed every clock ever built since. But here's what we forget. Those early hours weren't equal. In summer, when the days stretched long, the hours stretched with them. In winter, they shrank. Time still breathed with the planet. It bent with the seasons. It is measured by the world, not imposed upon it. That was about to change. The Egyptians gave us 12, but a different civilization gave us 60. And that number is everywhere. 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute. The entire architecture of your daily schedule traces back to a culture that collapsed over 2,000 years ago. The Babylonians of ancient Mesopotamia built their mathematics around a base 60 system. And before you ask why anyone would use 60 as a foundation for anything, consider this. 60 is one of the most useful numbers in existence. It divides evenly by 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That means you can cut an hour into halves, thirds, quarters, fifths, and sixths, and never deal with a messy fraction. For a civilization doing commerce, astronomy, and land division without calculators, 60 wasn't arbitrary. It was elegant. The Babylonians applied this system to the sky. They mapped the stars, tracked the planets, and divided their observations into clean mathematical units. Time stopped being something you felt and started being something you calculated. This was the turning point, because once time became math, it became something you could manipulate on paper, something you could plan around, something you could enforce. The shadow on the ground told you approximately where you were in the day. The Babylonian number told you exactly. And exactly is a different kind of power entirely. For thousands of years, time still belonged to the sky. Sundials were useless at night. Water clocks drifted. Hourglasses had to be flipped by hand. Time was still approximate, still human, still forgiving. Then the monks got involved. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church divided every single day into 8 canonical hours. Prayers that had to happen at specific moments, day and night, regardless of season, regardless of weather, regardless of whether the sun was cooperating. Miss the hour, and you had failed God himself. This was the pressure that cracked the ancient world open. Sometime in the late 13th century, someone built a machine with a mechanism called an escapement, a toothed wheel locked and released in a precise rhythmic tick by an oscillating controller. Each tick advanced the wheel by exactly one increment. Each increment measured exactly the same slice of time as the last. For the first time in human history, time had a heartbeat that owed nothing to the sun. It didn't matter if it was raining. It didn't matter if it was midnight in December. The mechanism ticked forward regardless. Indifferent, constant, unstoppable. The clock was no longer reading the universe. It was competing with it. And the world it was about to create would have been completely unrecognizable to every human being who had come before. By the 1800s, the mechanical clock had spread everywhere. Churches, town squares, wealthy homes. Time was measurable now, reliable now. But there was still one problem nobody had thought to solve. Every town kept its own time, not by choice exactly, just by logic. Time was still tied to the sun, and the sun peaks at a slightly different moment depending on where you're standing on the earth. Bristol ran 10 minutes behind London. Pittsburgh ran nearly 30 minutes behind Philadelphia. Every city, every village, every church tower was operating on its own private version of reality. For most of human history, this didn't matter. You rarely moved fast enough for the difference to catch up with you. Then came the railways. Suddenly, you could travel 60 miles in an hour. And when you arrived, the local clock said something completely different from the schedule in your hand. Trains were missing each other on single-track lines. Passengers were missing departures. The system was chaos dressed as progress. In 1883, American railroad companies did something extraordinary. They simply decided to standardize time across the entire continent, carving it into zones, each locked to a single uniform clock. Governments followed. Then the world followed. And just like that, the sun lost its job. Your local sky no longer decided what time it was. A coordination agreement between railway companies did. Time had stopped being natural. It had become infrastructure. So here is where the story gets strange. We built all of this. The sundials, the escapements, the railway zones, the atomic clocks accurate to 1 second every 300 million years. We built an entire civilization on the assumption that time is a fixed, universal thing. That the second here is a second everywhere. The clock on your wall is telling the same story as every other clock on the planet. And then Albert Einstein came along and quietly dismantled all of it. In 1905, Einstein published his theory of special relativity, and what it said was deeply uncomfortable. Time is not fixed. Time is not universal, and time is not the same for everyone. Time moves differently depending on how fast you're traveling. Time moves differently depending on how close you are to a massive gravitational field. An astronaut returning from 6 months on the International Space Station arrives back on Earth having aged slightly less than the people who have stayed behind. GPS satellites have to correct for the fact that time runs faster in orbit than it does on the ground. This is not theory. This is measured. This is proven. This is happening right now. The universe does not run on a clock. We do. We built a rigid, synchronized system and we plastered it over a reality that is fundamentally fluid, fundamentally relative, fundamentally indifferent to our schedules and our deadlines and our 3 a.m. anxiety. The clock was never telling you the time. It was telling you a story. Here is something no ancient Egyptian ever felt. The sensation of running out of time. Not the practical reality of a deadline approaching. Something deeper and more corrosive than that. The ambient, chronic feeling that your life is a countdown. That every hour unscheduled is an hour wasted. That you are perpetually behind on something. Perpetually insufficient. Perpetually racing against a number on a screen. This feeling is modern. This feeling is manufactured. And it is making us sick. Sleep researchers have documented what happens when human beings live at war with their own circadian rhythms, anxiety disorders, metabolic disruption, cognitive decline, a body that never fully rests because the clock on the wall and the clock inside your cells are telling completely different stories. We invented a tool to organize society. And then we forgot it was a tool. The universe gave us something honest: the slow rotation of the earth, the arc of the sun, the biological pulse of hunger and exhaustion and rest. Change was always real. The flow of one moment into the next was real. But the hour, the minute, the second, the alarm, the deadline, the calendar notification pulling you out of the present moment and into an imaginary future you haven't reached yet, that was us. We looked at the fluid, boundless river of reality and decided to build walls inside it. We invented the clock to serve us, and somewhere along the way, without noticing, we switched places. The clock is still ticking. We are the ones running.